Hey darlings. The shift in the surgical department, as always, was very difficult. Patients were transported one after another, and at the end of the day the doctor on duty, Ilya Sergeevich Timofeev, was already falling over from fatigue. I left the exam room nervous. The quarrelsome lady threw a tantrum and wouldn't allow herself to be examined, claiming that she was suffering from simple intoxication and wouldn't go under the knife. As a result, it was discovered that she had gallstones. The stone was blocking the duct and she needed urgent surgery. Thank God the patient was saved. As soon as Ilya entered the staff room, took a sip of hot tea, and was about to have a snack, a nurse, Svetochka, ran in and began to babble. Ilya Sergeevich, they brought a beggar in an ambulance. They picked me up right off the street and diagnosed acute appendicitis. Am I preparing the operating room? Don't jump, just sit down for a bit. It's not that bad, wait a second. And you need to rest. The 5th operation in one day is a joke? Ilya frowned and scolded Sveta. Thank you, of course, for your concern, but that is not possible. Isn't the beggar human? We are all people, and I have an obligation to help everyone, and everyone has their own second and even more. Come on, there's no time to sit still, otherwise it will explode even more. It will get worse. I need to examine it myself. Ilya could not stand it when people were divided into rich and poor, believing that for the former all doors were open, but for the latter it was not necessary to pay due attention. The man believed that everyone can go through difficult times, and that everyone has the right to treatment and attention, and it is the health professional's duty to help anyone. This was his position in life. The doctor looked at the patient. Lying on the stretcher was a beautiful woman of about 35 years old. She is really dressed in some kind of rag. There is dirt under her nails. Her hair has not been washed for a long time. But what eyes she had! Almond-shaped, tea-colored, with thick black lashes. There were tears and some kind of condemnation in them. The woman did not become hysterical and did not scream. She did not make a sound. She just bit her lips and trembled, enduring the pain. The doctor looked at the stomach and then began to ask and write down as usual. Surname, first name, patronymic, and your address. And why didn't you tell the ambulance crew anything about yourself? You have acute appendicitis and need urgent surgery. This is where you need to sign the consent for surgery. Do you have any documents with you? The woman simply replied calmly. My name is Vika. I don't have an address. I'm homeless. I live on the street. I'm not going to sign anything. I want to die. It's my right. Leave me alone, please, guys. The surgeon waved his hand. All clean. The case is serious, but there is no time to discuss it now. Take him to the surgery center. Sorry, my dear. I am obliged to save your life. That's why I studied for so many years. Everything will be fine. You'll see. The operation was successful, and after half an hour, she recovered painfully from the general anesthetic. The doctor sat nearby and, together with the anesthetist, monitored the patient's condition. She ran around the bed and shouted something unimaginable. The Countess's hiding place. Countess Sevastyanova, I'll find it anyway. Listen, I'll find him. You do not trust me? I'm not lying. There is a hiding place. It's you who doesn't understand anything. Ilya exchanged glances with his colleague, who smiled and said loudly, Oh, I didn't hear that. She's having hallucinations now. She's coming out of a medicated sleep. This happens often. She will soon come to her senses and will not remember what heresy she was talking about. But our patient definitely doesn't look like the Countess. After making sure that everything was fine with the patient, Ilya finally began to prepare to go home and only now realized how deadly tired he was. My head was pounding and my legs were falling apart. The man stopped at a supermarket on the way, bought food for dinner, and a beautiful teddy bear for his daughter. I took the child from a neighbor who was helping the doctor and agreed to take care of the baby. The daughter was very happy to see her father and hugged him tightly.
Eat that.
Why are you so late? I miss you so much. Are you on duty again tomorrow? When you have a day off, let's go for a walk in the park. Look what a boat I made with my friend Sashka. I'm going to sail it on the lake water. I also learned a poem for tomorrow from Aunt Toma. Would you like to tell me? Ilya smiled, as he loved her little bud. He nodded and praised. My good girl, of course, tell me. And let's go to the park for a walk. Look what I bought you. Do you like the bear? The little girl clapped her hands and twirled the toy, babbling. Thanks, Dad. How soft and fluffy. I'll call him Bonnie. I love you lots. Let me help you with dinner? I'll cut the cucumbers for the salad and put the kettle on. The family had dinner and Ilya began to check his homework, opened his diary and gasped. There was a bad grade for behavior, and the teacher put a note calling him to school. The man was surprised. Normally his daughter always behaved well. She was usually quiet and well-mannered. She wouldn't hurt a fly. He didn't immediately scold her. He tried to figure out what the matter was. Svetochka, do you have D? What happened? Tell Daddy, please. The daughter was sad, frowned, and replied reluctantly. The boys offended me and made fun of me, but I couldn't resist and reciprocated. They are angry. They say that I don't have a mother and that my father is not real. Should I remain silent? The father hugged his daughter, held her close, and began to comfort her. They are, of course, wrong, but fighting is still not good. You tell them your father is a surgeon. He saves lives. And he loves you very much. And if they offend you again, he will cut off your ears. Tell me immediately if they bother you again. I'll talk to them myself. And with the teacher too. Now let's take a shower and sleep. The morning is wiser than the night. Everything will be fine, my love. I won't let anyone hurt you. Ilya left daycare, made himself some strong tea, and decided to take a few hours off tomorrow to go to school and talk to his teacher. He thought, if my Galochka were alive, everything would be different. I couldn't save her even though I was a doctor. He took a sip of the aromatic drink and began to remember his entire life with longing and sadness. Ilya grew up in an ordinary and very poor family. His mother worked in a canteen. His father was a turner. They lived like everyone else in their small town. They tried to save money, but they rarely succeeded. Despite the difficulties, my mother never lost her optimism and managed to prepare these treats with the simplest ingredients. Ilya still nostalgically remembered the taste of his incomparable potato pancakes and homemade sprats with tomatoes. Since he was a child, the boy dreamed of becoming a doctor. Since school, he studied medical encyclopedia. His parents supported their son, although they doubted that without money and connections he would be able to enter medical university. Ilya knew his wife almost since kindergarten. They were neighbors. Their parents were strong friends. Ilya and Galia attended the same kindergarten group in the same class at school and grew up almost like brother and sister. Of course, all sorts of things happened, fights and childhood insults, but still they could not stay angry with each other for long. They quickly reconciled. We got used to trusting each other's sorrows and joys. Our souls grew together. But after school their paths diverged for a while. Ilya entered medical school, as he dreamed of, and left his hometown for the capital, but Galia decided to study at a pedagogical college and stayed at home. The young people promised each other that they would call each other every day and be friends like before. In the beginning it was like this. They shared news and advances in their studies and could talk for hours. But over time, Galia began to call less and less, spoke little, answered in monosyllables. Ilya could not stand it and asked directly, Galchanok, did I offend you in any way? Why are you so cold? Or am I forgetting something? Or maybe you got a groom there? To confess? Shocked Galia replied. How did you guess? Yes, I have a boyfriend now. Max, we're dating. Well, I thought, you and I are now separated and have chosen different professions. This means that everyone needs to build their own life. You're not offended, are you? We're just friends, aren't we? For some reason, Ilya felt so much pain, as if everything had turned upside down inside. Why this happened, he himself still did not understand, but he did not show it. He remained silent as if everything was fine and he was happy by Galia. Their relationship before the breakup was really strange, a mix of strong friendship and something more. They were both attracted to each other, but were probably afraid to admit it to themselves. From then until graduation, they almost stopped communicating. Sometimes, of course, he went to student parties. But things did not go beyond fleeting romances. Galia firmly established herself in Ilya's soul. No one else understood him like that, and he didn't need him. He learned from his parents that his beloved had fallen on hard times. She was already preparing for the wedding, got pregnant, but the scoundrel fiancé abandoned her and abandoned the child. Supposedly, he was offered a promising position in the city and left, and the girl eagerly had an abortion. Now she's depressed, like a shadow. Upon hearing this news, the guy immediately ran home for the weekend, and first of all he ran not to his mother, but to Gala, in the next apartment. His mother opened it for him, was delighted and started making noise. Ilyashenka. Hello. Oh, how tall you are. 2 meters, just like your father. Congratulations on stopping by. So tell me, how are you studying? What is city life like there? The guy didn't seem to hear her and asked, Call Galia, please. I need to speak to her urgently. She is at home? The woman just waved her hand. There she sits in her room for days. She doesn't want to get a job in her specialty. She cries every day, and that's it. There is no sweet spot with her. I don't know how to reach her anymore. She was mistaken, Ilyasha. She ruined her own stupid life. I feel sorry for her. She has no strength. Ilya entered Galina's room. The windows were tightly closed. The girl was lying on the bed in her pajamas, curled up and completely still. Hearing someone enter, she reluctantly raised her head. She saw Ilya and began to cry, covered herself with a blanket and cried. Why did you come? I don't want to see anyone. Now I am infertile. Because of an abortion, I will never have children again. Go away. I beg you. It's all my fault. I do not want anything. And Max turned out to be the last bastard. He said that he needed to build a career and not clean up his children's snot. Ilya didn't even think about leaving. His heart was torn apart. He couldn't look at the suffering of the person closest to him. The guy at that very second realized how much he loved Galia, no matter what. He lay down next to her, hugged her, and began to whisper, I came after you, my stupid Galchenok. I need you. You listen? You and I were made for each other. Get ready. You will go with me. You will find a job in the capital, rent an apartment, a diploma in 3 months. We will not be lost. And the kids? God willing, we will have more children. This is all nonsense. The main thing is to tell me why you got involved with Max. What got into you? Don't you love me at all? Galia turned around and suddenly threw herself into his arms, crying loudly, as before, in childhood. Fool, why? You didn't call me in love, you didn't call me you. So I decided you didn't need me and, out of spite, I started an affair with Max. I thought he was older than me, smarter, with a promising fiancé, but everything ended up different. He didn't need me. He played with me like a doll and abandoned me. You really love me? Even now? And you won't give up? I will become your best wife, my dear. How I miss you, Ilyashenka. My love. The couple kissed passionately and, as if there had been no separation, their hearts beat in unison. From that moment on, the young people did not separate for a minute. Ilya took Galia to the capital. They got married modestly and began to live as a family. After graduating from university, the man got a job in a regular hospital in the surgical department. Galia went to work as a teacher in a kindergarten near her home, and life gradually calmed down. We saved money, bought a 2-room apartment, a nice car, and tried to go to the sea in the summer. He lived in perfect harmony. Galia turned out to be an exemplary housewife. The apartment was always in perfect order, and there was delicious food in the fridge. The wife took care of the children every day, and now she really wanted to have a child from her beloved. But years passed, and the pregnancy never happened. How she reproached herself for this relationship with Max and, most importantly, for the abortion. I understood that this was the reason for infertility. The couple did not despair. They were subjected to all kinds of tests, hoping for medical miracles. Something also changed in Ilya's work a year ago. The head of the department was changed, and it turned out that he became Maxim, the same rival as Ilya. Everyone understood how this narrow-minded weasel got such a place. Dad made a fuss. Naturally, hostility immediately arose between the men. There seemed to be no open conflict, but the relationship was very tense. Maxim was a man with a dark and rotten soul. He could go over his head for the sake of his career and did not value specialists. He could easily lie to a person or set them up if he needed to. Some employees felt this personally and rushed to quit or transfer to another department. The manager now deliberately scheduled Ilya's shifts so that he had almost no days off and watched how he would leave. The surgeon himself also could not forgive him for Galia and deliberately took on the most difficult cases, violated the instructions, and took the patient out of the other world. Maxim was furious, but there was no way to punish the surgeon. Crowds of grateful patients came to him, and the top management approved of his courage in making non-standard decisions. A year ago, Ilya and his wife, desperate to give birth to a baby, made a joint decision to remove the child from the shelter. We went there several times, looked closely, and everyone couldn't decide. I felt really sorry for all the children, but his plans were not destined to come true. Gali had a heart attack at work and was already diagnosed with a heart attack in the hospital. Why? Nobody knew. Ilya almost went crazy, took Galia from the clutches of the disease, forbade her to lift weights, to be nervous, and surrounded her with so much care and love. The woman seemed to be improving, the dynamics were good, and then her parents died. Because of that, she had a second heart attack, and she disappeared. It was the most terrible moment. 3 funerals at the same time. Ilya thought he couldn't handle it all. His hands were shaking. He couldn't operate. He took a vacation and spent some time at home with his parents. It's easier to survive this loss together. But soon they started calling from the hospital and begging me to come back. We so without it. Ilya hugged his mother and said quietly, "We have to go, Mom. You know, I want to make Galachka's dream and mine come true, and even take a child out of the orphanage. Would you and Dad mind? It's very important to me. Otherwise, I will be bored out of my mind." Mom understood everything. "That's right, son. Life goes on. Maybe you will meet a good woman and fall in love. Who knows? And we will always be happy to have a grandson or granddaughter. Do what your heart says. You know, Dad and I are always on your side." At work, he was greeted warmly and sympathized, and only the manager walked around with a victorious look, as if he was happy that everything had turned out this way. And he spread dirty rumors that a doctor who didn't save his wife was worthless. And soon Ilya went to the shelter again. His documents have almost been collected, but he couldn't decide if he wanted a boy or a girl and at what age. Everything happened somehow by itself. Ilya suddenly saw a girl of about 8 years old with braids running down the hall and gasped. It was a copy of his button. Check marks. The same blue eyes, pointy nose with scattered freckles, and rebellious bangs. It was as if he was transported back to his childhood and even shook his head. I reached the baby and touched his hand. "Hello, ray of light? Where are you going in such a hurry?" "My name is Ilya. Let's get to know each other?" The baby actively stretched out his little palm and answered him sharply. "You are trying in vain, uncle. I have a mother and I love her. And I don't need anyone else. I will not go to someone else's family. Find another girl." Ilya was even surprised, but he didn't give up. "That's how it is. So that's good. But why are you here then? Where is your mother?" The girl replied reluctantly. She disappeared and they took me here. It was the evil non-father who arranged everything, I know. Although I told them, these guardianship ants, that I was already an adult and could live alone and wait for my mother. But no one listened to me. But I'm sure Mom will get me out of here. My name is Sonia. Well, okay. I'll run. Aunt Valia is on duty in the dining room today. She promised me an apple pie. Ilya said goodbye. Listen, Sonia. Well, let's be friends then? To agree? Can I come to you again? What should I bring you? The girl thought a little and replied, You can be friends. You are good. Bring me multicolored beads and fishing line. I love making bracelets. Do you want me to gossip for you too? And also ice cream, big, creamy, in a crunchy cup. My mom always bought this for me. The man decided to ask the manager about Sonia. She waved her hands. Don't listen to her. The child invents all kinds of fantastic stories. The mother herself refused, and we have the corresponding document. But you can't tell a child that. I do not want to hurt you. And so the girl is good, smart, homely. It's going to be difficult for her here. I don't know what happened in their family, but it's clear from the child that she was loved and not neglected. So come more often. She will get used to you, and she will definitely love you. You will see. You are a decent person, you have your own home, you are financially secure. So if you decide to adopt Sonia, I will be very happy and will help in every way possible. Although this is not entirely within the rules, I think you and I will be able to come to an agreement and everything will work out for us. And so it happened. The more Ilya began to come to Sonia, the closer they became. The girl now called him every day. He gave her a phone. She waited and missed her very much. And once she said, You said you want to be my father? Get me out of here. I agree. But just promise that if my mother is found, you will allow me to see her. I still can't believe she left me, and I'm really going to wait for her. Then Ilya adopted Sonia. A year later, she already called him father with all her might, barely remembered her previous life and was a happy, ordinary child at home. On vacation, she went to visit her grandparents, and when Ilya was on duty, a kind neighbor looked after her. Then he and his daughter lived together. Ilya loved Sonia very much, adored her. It was she who literally pulled him out of depression and forced him to live. When he stirred her, her soul was filled with warmth and all adversities and dark thoughts receded. The next day, Ilya went to school and met with his daughter's teacher. They talked in the staff room. Irina Filipovna said passionately, This is the first time such an incident has happened. Sonia is a very good girl. She studies hard and her behavior has never been bad. And then I had to separate Sonia from Misha. She literally attacked the boy. That's unheard of. And your daughter has some obsessive fantasies too. She tells everyone that her great-grandmother is Countess Sevastyanova and that she knows where countless treasures are hidden. Of course, her colleagues make fun of her. You should talk to Sonia about her behavior, I ask you. I'm very worried about this. Ilya even felt bad. Now the teacher was repeating word for word the nonsense that his recent patient, a beggar, was saying. How is this possible? How absurd. He nodded absently and replied, Okay, I'll talk to my daughter, but you too, please talk to the boy. He insulted his daughter, called her homeless, said that her father wasn't real. You understand. Sonia began to forget her past, and here it is. So she couldn't take it. I will not allow anyone to bully my son. Aren't adopted children people? In the evening, when Ilya returned from work and picked up his daughter, the first thing he decided to do was find out everything. Svetochka, dear, who is Countess Sevastyanova, and why do you consider yourself her great-granddaughter? And what countless treasures are you telling your colleagues about? Would you mind sharing with me? I'm interested too. But it turns out that both your teacher and the children know this, but the father does not. It's even offensive. You really don't trust me? Sonia became very serious. Well, actually it's a secret. and I only told Inna, but she's very talkative. She told everyone, and she is also called a friend. I remember my mother well. She loved me very much. We lived in the village, in a huge, old house. So my mother always told me this story, that in this very house, once upon a time, the real Countess Sevastyanova lived, and she was our relative. And she hid a cache somewhere in the bad years. There was lots and lots of gold. Mom dreamed of finding him, but she couldn't. She told me that if we had found him, we would have immediately left our stepfather far away at sea. Nobody believes me, but my mother never lied to me and she couldn't leave me, I know. Ilya sighed. Poor child. He still misses his mother. He put his daughter in his arms, stroked her hair, and said, "It's a very interesting fairy tale. Or maybe it's true, who knows? Your mother knows best. But are we going to keep this a secret? Don't tell anyone this again. Fine? And I promise that I will try to find out everything about your mother, and about the mysterious countess, and about the treasures." The girl hugged her father. "And truth? Thank you, Dad, for believing in me. I promise I won't tell anyone else. Will you really find my mother? I love you, Dad. I don't think so, but I miss Mom so much. Her name is Vika. She is so beautiful to me, like a princess." Ilya put his daughter to bed and thought about it. The 8-year-old herself could not come up with such a fairy tale about the countess, and even with such a complex surname. Everything was very complicated. Is the beggar woman really Sonia's mother? Well, there are no such coincidences. We need to talk to her tomorrow before she is discharged. A very interesting story is unfolding. Ilya entered the room. The same operated patient was already walking. She washed her hair. She was clean and fresh, and even in a government-laundered hospital gown she looked very attractive. She saw the doctor and smiled sweetly at him and ran to thank him. "Thank you very much, Ilya Sergeevich. You saved my life. The nurse told me. Any more and I would have developed peritonitis. I told you a lot in the exam room then." "Sorry." Ilya sat down on a chair, examined the patient, and was satisfied. "Victoria, you're fine. The stitches aren't bleeding and there's no fever. I think we will be discharged in 2 days. As I understand it, you don't need a sick leave or issue one." Vika lowered her eyes and suddenly asked, "Can you keep me here longer? I understand it's a strange request, but still, I have absolutely nowhere to go. But I still don't have the strength to wander the streets. Weakness also pulls me. Here, at least, they feed me and I sleep warm and safe. At least 1 more week. Okay?" The doctor frowned and asked, "Okay, I'll hug you a little longer. It's a week. But I also have a request for you then. Tell me honestly, how did you end up on the street? What happened to you? And yet, in your delirium under anesthesia, you shouted something about Countess Sevastyanova and about a cache of treasures? Where did you get that? It's very important for me to know this." Vika panicked. Her eyes ran around. Did she hesitate to tell everything or not? And yet I decided. I wasn't always homeless. I grew up in a rich family in a village. My father was a farmer. We had all kinds of cattle and cultivated huge fields, growing wheat and sunflowers. Our house was very old, standing since pre-revolutionary times, of stained oak, strong, with a mezzanine, which for some reason my mother simply called the light room, and 2 annexes. When I was still little, I was always surprised by how interesting the building was, the high ceilings and the big arch, and my grandmother told me that her grandmother, Countess Sevastyanova, also lived there. And the family passed down from generation to generation that she hid a hiding place somewhere in the house or on her territory. There should be your family jewelry and old coins, books, and personal belongings. But no matter how hard we looked, it was useless. They couldn't find it. All the villagers knew about this legend. Grandma did her best, and they openly laughed at us. Nobody believed this could be true. I want to study veterinary science. Since I was a child, I loved animals and touched them. I took care of abandoned kittens and weak chickens and fed them drop by drop. It was there that my first love came to me. It's a shame to say, but it was my teacher, Yevgeny Alexandrovich. Twice my age, gray hair. And the devil, as they say, hits the nail on the head. He looked after me so beautifully, saying that he hadn't lived with his wife for a long time and that the stamp in the passport was just a formality. I don't know why I fell in love with him without memory. Of course, we met secretly, so no one in the department would guess, and we didn't go anywhere together. I would be a fool to ask myself, why is this happening? But no matter what, 18 meaningless years, Genya turned my head, needless to say. Well, everything follows the script of a cheap melodrama. The pregnancy took me by surprise, and my elderly Romeo immediately disowned me. It turns out that his wife had no idea about his affairs, and he didn't even intend to divorce her. I was secretly expelled. I didn't drink, and I even came home with a belly. At first my father screamed and swore, and the neighbors looked at me unkindly. But then Dad left. Everything calmed down. You should have seen how happy he was with his granddaughter. He was bursting with pride. It's a shame that my parents passed away so early. First father, and a year later mother, as if following him. It was a difficult time for me. Everything accumulated a lot. The grief, the pain of loss, the care for my little daughter. I thought I couldn't handle it. I couldn't handle it. I couldn't handle it. After the death of my parents, the business was transferred to me. I already had little Svetochka, but I still didn't have a husband. An unsuccessful first love taught me not to trust men, and I didn't have time to think about them. And then, after some time, Grishka Sevastianov began to court me. He himself is not from the village. He is a newcomer. I tried to set up an apiary. I wanted to open my own business, but it didn't work out. At first I didn't notice him. I avoided him. I even got angry. He was very annoying. He literally didn't let me pass. He said that he loved me and my daughter, began to diligently help with the housework, and generally gained confidence. Little by little I got used to it. I even fell in love with it. Yes, and the neighbors encouraged me. They say, he is a prominent young man and should not yawn, but get married. To tell the truth, in the village there is no choice. There are only lazy people or drunks, and without a man there was no way in my business. Previously, my father put everything together and managed everything. Then I made up my mind and gave Grisha my consent. A year later we got married. Of course, he also knew about that family, the countess, and the hiding place. Everyone laughed, saying that these were all fairy tales. Sonia didn't like her stepfather. I don't know why. He didn't seem to offend her. She kept saying he was bad and called him a non-father. But I thought it was just childish jealousy. My daughter would get used to it over time. It's completely unbearable without a man at home. Grisha also treated Sonia evenly, neither good nor bad. He never offended, but there was still a certain coldness between them. My daughter also changed her tactics, stopped getting angry, but stayed with me all the time, and Grisha just put up with it gracefully. I felt it. It seemed like we were living well, managing the household, and the business was prospering, until I got very sick. I started to feel dizzy, faint, and vomiting. I didn't go anywhere for a long time. I blamed it all on tiredness or magnetic storms, but one day I lost consciousness and woke up in an ambulance. Grisha was scared and could not bring me to my senses. I was admitted to the hospital for examination and taken to the city. I was very worried about my daughter. After all, Grisha is not her family, and about the business too. But my husband assured me that he would take care of everything. At first he came often, showed my daughter's drawings, and I talked to Sonia every day on the phone, bringing documents for signature. Well, then I got worse and worse. My vision also got worse. I almost went blind. I mentally said goodbye to everyone. I thought I wouldn't survive. It was so bad. After undergoing a complete examination, doctors discovered that there was a tumor in the brain. Thank goodness it's not malignant, but it still compressed the nerve endings, which caused all my scary symptoms. Conservative treatment was futile, had to be removed urgently. I was very worried, such a complex operation, but I agreed, because there was no other way to recover. The doctors immediately warned that there would be a long rehabilitation, and then I myself suggested that Grisha sign a power of attorney for the right to manage the farm and for him to sign the documents himself. Before the operation, Grishka came to me, tried to cheer me up and support me, saying that everything would be fine, that I would soon get better, and that we would live happily as before. He also gave me a lot of documents to sign. I blindly believed him. I signed everything. I had surgery. The rehabilitation was long. They didn't let me leave the hospital. I turned off the phone, but he was silent, and that scared me a lot. This never happened before. And in general, I thought that he would come right away as soon as I had surgery. I really wanted to see my daughter, look at her for at least a minute, and make sure that everything was fine with her. Grisha never returned, and his phone was turned off. I was very worried. I couldn't find a place for myself. I didn't know what was wrong with my daughter. I couldn't wait until I was discharged. I drove to the village with a heavy soul, approached the house and choked. Complete strangers lived there. They said they bought this house from my husband. They didn't see any girls. They brought the documents and showed them. Imagine how horrified I was. I tried to explain to them that there was no way I could sell the house. I cried. I became hysterical, but it's all in vain. I was kicked out of the door. I ran to my neighbor, Aunt Luda. I told her everything. I tried to find out what happened and where my daughter went, but she looked at me like I was crazy. A neighbor told me that my guardianship took Svetochka to an orphanage. They had in their hands my statement that I myself was abandoning my daughter, and Grisha also bragged to her that I had signed a deed of gift for his house. After selling the house, Grisha immediately left somewhere. No one saw him again. All the neighbors were surprised. How could I do this? They thought she had lost her mind. I myself didn't understand anything, but I understood that apparently Grisha handed me all these papers when I saw almost nothing before the operation. All this still seems to me like a kind of nightmare. A nightmare. I started looking for my daughter in shelters, but no one told me anything. I wasn't supposed to. I thought about suing, but what's the point? I don't have money. I don't even have money to hire a lawyer. And where to look for this bastard? He probably went abroad with my money. That's how I went from a normal family woman to a beggar in an instant. I thought this only happened in bad movies. My hands gave up completely. I wandered aimlessly through the city and roared. You wouldn't wish that on your enemy. Then the caretaker took pity on me and sheltered me in her pantry. Sometimes I spent the night there, sweeping yards looking for pennies. I understand that from the outside everything seems absurd. Probably with a passport I can get a job somewhere and rent a room. I have to fight, but I simply don't have the strength for that at all. There is a devastated field inside me. Without my daughter, the white light is not dear to me. Just realizing that I will never see her again kills me. The poor girl probably thinks I'm a monster, that I betrayed her and abandoned her. How painful these thoughts are. I dream about Sonia every night. I try to hug her. I wake up crying and I don't want to live at all. When my stomach hurt, I was even happy. I thought I had finally suffered. It was better to die than to prolong such a miserable existence. Vika covered her face with her hands and began to cry, crying bitterly. She was so embarrassed and even embarrassed to have to tell such details of her life to a virtual stranger. She thought the doctor, like everyone else, would look at her like she was crazy and ignore her problems. In our cruel times, no one needs anyone. Ilya could not bear it. His heart trembled. He saw that the woman was not lying. It was simply impossible to imagine such a thing. He took her hand carefully and began to say, I am, of course, surprised. You really got into trouble. I sincerely sympathize with you. I know where your daughter is. She lives with me. I adopted her. It's such an incredible coincidence that I still can't believe it. And if you and Sonia hadn't uttered the same phrase about the Countess, nothing would have been clear. At the shelter they told me that her mother abandoned her. But Sonia loves you, remembers you, and is looking forward to it. She doesn't believe you can leave her. So, Victoria, in 3 days I will discharge you, and you will live with me. You can't separate mother and daughter. It's wrong. Stay with me for now and we'll see. I won't let you wander any longer. I'll help you. For Svetochka's sake. I love her very much and wish her happiness. Everything will be fine. The woman couldn't believe what she was hearing. She started making the sign of the cross and ran to hug the doctor. Ilya Sergeevich, isn't this a joke? Are you with Sonia? Lord, what happiness. Thanks. I can't believe I found my girl. Don't think, I won't be a freeloader. I'll do everything at home. I'll find a job. I just wish I could see my daughter and be with her. I am the happiest today. Ilya took out his phone and showed Vika a photo of his daughter. Asked, it's her? His daughter? Or maybe I was wrong. I still can't believe this could happen. She stroked the screen and lamented, my baby, my dear son. As she grew up, she became an adult. We wish we could see you soon. I would kiss her. It's definitely her. If you don't believe me, you can get a genetic test. She also has a mole under her knee. On the left, you can check it. Thank you for not ignoring me, for believing in me, for deciding to tell me about your daughter. After all, you could have remained silent, and I would have wandered even more, continued to look for Svetochka, and would have died of longing for her. You have a big and kind heart. I am in your debt. The surgeon looked at his watch and whistled. However, you and I started talking. The operation is in 15 minutes and I am completely unprepared. I'm going to run. And you eat? The soup has long been cold. They didn't even play. Now you need to quickly gain strength for the sake of your daughter. In the evening, Ilya went to the nursery to check how Sonia solved math problems. But I saw this photo. The baby sat on the windowsill and looked sadly at the stars in the dark night sky. Ilya calmly sat down next to him, hugged the child, and asked, why are you sad, dear? Problems at school again? Or are classes not going well? So it's not a problem. Let's decide together. Sonia sighed heavily, like an adult, and replied, everything's fine at school, Dad. The bear no longer offends me. He asked for forgiveness, and we made peace. And I did the math a long time ago. I'm thinking, maybe my mother died? And they didn't tell me the truth? Otherwise, where would she have disappeared for so long? Maybe she's on that star now? And will I never see her again? Did you leave our address at the shelter? Maybe Mom doesn't know where to look for me now? Tears welled up in Ilya's eyes from pity for the child, and he said carefully, daughter, remember, I recently promised you that I would find your mother, so I found it. She's in the hospital right now, where I work, and she really hasn't abandoned you. It was your non-father who set everything up. On the contrary, your mother was trying to find you this whole time. She was sad. Soon she will come here and live with us. Do you want to see her? Are you happy? The girl froze, as if she didn't believe the words, and then she started crying and threw herself on her father's neck. Daddy, thank you, you are the best. Will she arrive tomorrow? Can I visit you in the hospital? I beg you. I can't believe I'm going to see my mom. And I told everyone, that Mom wasn't like that. But they didn't believe it. Ilya kissed the baby and reassured her. Okay, tomorrow we'll stop by before school, and you'll see your mother in person. I understand how important this is to you. Now everything will be fine, my little one, and you will never be sad again. You promise? Now go to sleep. Good night, my kitten. You won't stop loving your father when you see your mother, will you? I'm even a little worried, because I love you so much, my sunshine, and I only want the best for you. Sonia almost shouted. No, what are you talking about? I love you even more now. and I will always love you. I promise I won't fight or argue with the idiots at school anymore, so I don't bother you. Let them say what they want. You, like a good wizard, fulfilled my most cherished dream. Nobody has a father like him, and I'm lucky. I have. Sonia hugged her teddy bear and tossed and turned in bed, unable to sleep. She was already imagining how she would hug her mom tomorrow. Finally, your most cherished dream has come true. The meeting was so emotional that not only they themselves, but also the nurses and other patients cried. Sonia grabbed Vika tightly, pressed herself against her, and she kissed her, stroked her hair, and cried, "My dear, my fish, I miss you so much. I believed I would find you. I dreamed of you every night. Now I will always be by your side and will not let you go anywhere. I can imagine how bad it was for you without me, what you had to endure." Even Ilya shed tears. It was so touching. The man decided to help Victoria in everything and return her rights to her daughter and prove that the house was sold illegally. After discharge, Vika moved to the surgeon's house. At first I was a little shy, especially when Ilya insisted that she go shopping with him and bought normal things, perfumes, and cosmetics. The woman was so grateful to him. No other person in the world had done so much good for her. She quickly got used to it and now devoted all her time to her daughter. I braided her hair, did homework with her, and picked her up from school. Sonia wiped everyone's noses. The boys looked at each other in bewilderment and whispered, "Look, you didn't lie." And her mother was indeed found. And the girl walked proudly with her mother by her hand and was the happiest at that moment. Ilya hired an experienced lawyer and began to promote Vika's case. They wrote a statement to the police, attached a certificate that she was in serious condition in the hospital and could not voluntarily and knowingly give up her daughter, and the house, as it turned out, was sold with the help of black realtors. After 6 months of exhausting trips to the courts and various authorities, Vika finally received back the rights to her daughter and her home. But it was of little use. The new tenants were forced to move out, but they either set fire to the house in retaliation, they say, "Don't let anyone have it," or for some other reason, but the house caught fire almost to the ground. Vika was not very upset. She hugged Ilya and whispered, "I mentally said goodbye to the house a long time ago. God be with them. With these riches, whether they are there or not, money doesn't buy happiness. The main thing for me is that my daughter is nearby, and I finally found my soulmate. Or rather, my daughter found her father, and I was not mistaken. You are the best husband and father. Thank you for everything." Ilya's heart calmed down for the first time after Galia's death, and the wound in his soul was healed. Now that he has found a family, a daughter, what else can you dream of? They didn't live richly, but they lived in love. But the scoundrel Grisha was never found. He actually went abroad and his trail was lost somewhere in Europe. Ilya and Vika lived like a very friendly family. Ilya was now calm towards Sonia. A delicious and hearty dinner was always waiting for him when he returned from work. The apartment was clean. And most importantly, Sonia's eyes shone and were no longer dull. Vika finally found a job and got a job at a veterinary clinic. She loved animals since she was a child and knew how to take care of them, knew how to get close to them and calm them down. One day I brought home a beautiful carrier cat, white as snow, huge, with long hair, and I lamented, "Ilyusha, daughter, just imagine. The owners brought the pain to fall asleep. They themselves are dressed to the nines. The chickens don't bite for money, and the cat turned out to be unnecessary. See, I ruined their expensive curtains and leather sofa." I tried to explain to them that all they had to do was play with the animal, that you could train a cat to use a scratching post and everything would work out. But they didn't want to hear anything, paid the money and left. What kind of people? Forgive me, I couldn't. There are tears in your eyes. Is it impossible to see a devoted animal suffer and not understand why they did this to him? why they abandoned him. Sonia immediately took the cat carefully in her arms. He began to purr and stroke, and he was not afraid at all. And he even hugged the girl with his paws. And Ilya once again convinced himself that he was not mistaken in Vika, because it is by the way a person treats animals that one can judge what he is like. The man also scratched the cat behind the ear and winked at him. Well, cutie, welcome to your new home. How could you refuse such a handsome man? Well, don't be sad. We will love you and we won't hurt you. Thus, Snowball remained in the surgeon's family. It became a pet. One day off, Vika suggested at breakfast, "My dears, shall we go to my village? To the same house where I was born and raised? I had a strange dream today. My grandmother spoke to me as if she were alive. Once again reminded me of that hiding place of Countess Sevastyanova and reproached me for never having found it. I didn't wake up alone. I understand. It's nonsense, just a dream. But still, let's not take our time, going back and forth." Sonia was immediately delighted. "Alive. Shall we go to the village? Will you be able to see Aunt Luda's cow Manka there? Or a pig? I'm for it." Ilya reluctantly agreed, although he didn't want to go so far on his day off for no apparent reason. But he did not dare to refuse his beloved wife. Let her stay there. Maybe she will feel better, since this is very important to her. It took a long time to get there on a dusty and bumpy road, and I finally reached the place. All that remained of the house was ashes. Some outbuildings still survive. Vika could barely handle her emotions. She wanted to cry. Her childhood and youth were spent in this house. She was happy here. And then some scoundrel took it and destroyed everything. And their family nest is no more. How much work, how much effort your parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents put into this house. What now? Pathetic ashes. She wandered among sticks and charred black bricks and didn't know what she was looking for. Ilya stood nearby and did not interfere. He understood that Vika needed to be alone now. And Sonia, like any restless and curious child, began to look everywhere and examine everything. She took a large stick and began poking the burned wall, as if she were fighting an invisible enemy, imagining herself a warrior. Suddenly, bricks fell. The girl screamed in fright and barely managed to jump. A metal chest fell to the ground. Ilya automatically ran to his daughter, scared for her. Vika also jumped up, and all three were surprised by the discovery. Ilya decided to joke. "Well, the Countess's treasures have been found. Now let's get rich." Although he didn't believe it for a minute. Probably some old junk. He tried very hard to open the trunk, and then he had no time for games. There really were a lot of old coins and jewelry inside. Silent scene. All three were silent and watching. They couldn't believe they were actually seeing all of this. Little Sonia was surprised. "Wow, Mom. So is this all true? Did the fairy tale you told me come true? What beautiful brooches can you touch? Do I really look like a princess?" And Sonia put a heavy brooch on her chest, which sparkled in the sun with all the colors of the rainbow. Vika was the first to recover from the shock. She stammered. "It was a prophetic dream. It was my grandmother who brought me here. So everything is true. And after so many years, I've lost faith in whether that same countess really existed, or maybe Grandma got it all mixed up because of her age. Baby, we're rich now. Do you have any idea how much all this costs?" Ilya put an end to his joy and said carefully, "I'm going to upset you, but according to the law, we must hand over all this to the state and we will receive the required percentage. We need to notify the police about the find. Otherwise, we will also receive an administrative sentence for concealment. Something like. But I'm also amazed. How many years the cash has been here, waiting in the wings and firmly embedded in the wall. Incredible." Vika was a little upset. "Well, I didn't know. For so many years I fanatically dreamed of finding a hiding place, and you will have to give up everything. Although, on the other hand, perhaps these coins are displayed in a museum, and the icon is placed in a church. This is a historical treasure. And the bonus is enough for us. Let's go to the seaside, relax, open a savings account for Sonia. It will help her when she grows up. I also want to rebuild this house and open a museum in memory of my ancestors. I think Grandma would be happy. And finally, I want to help the shelter, the same one where you found Svetochka. Give the kids some joy. What do you think of my plans? Ilya kissed Vika and replied, You say everything right, my good girl. So be it. For me, the main thing is that I found you and my daughter, and everything else is not so important. As you decide, so shall it be. The couple decided so, but it turned out that Vika was in no way obliged to hand over the treasures to the state. After all, she is his legal heir. Of course, I had to collect a bunch of documents and dig up files, but as a result, the entire contents of the chest were recognized as the woman's inheritance. The news that treasures were found in a burned house quickly spread throughout the village. The neighbors only gossiped about it, as everyone knew this legend about the cash, but absolutely no one seriously believed it. When Vika started to rebuild her house, neighbors came to her, started talking about life, and found out if she would go back to working in agriculture. It was unpleasant for the woman. It turns out that when she became rich, everyone immediately began to need her. And when grief happened to her, no one reached out to help. They considered her crazy. And when they found out that she was going to open a house museum here, they started twisting her head, saying that she was blessed. Who cares about all this? Who will go there? But they were very wrong. They wrote about the treasures in newspapers and on television, reconstructed the entire historical family chain, and discovered that famous counts lived here. This amazing story excited many people, and after the discovery, tourists willingly came here, listened with interest, looked at manuscripts and books, a dress embroidered with stones, which were also found in that chest. And at the same time, we enjoy our holidays in the village. The places here were truly picturesque. At the hospital, Vika's husband noticed some changes. The manager, upon learning that Ilya was again on horseback, and even enriched, could not stand it. He became angry, fierce, and during the next inspection he made many unforgivable mistakes. And since complaints had already rained against him before, the dismissals of employees became more frequently. Ministry of Health officials decided to remove Maxim from his post, transfer him to a small town far from the capital, and appoint Ilya as head. It was a completely fair decision, as the surgeon did a lot for the department. He fought to save the lives of all patients, and although they repeatedly tried to attract him to work in private clinics, he did not agree. Because he believed that everyone needed to be saved, both rich and poor, and he didn't want to trade his talent. The whole team was happy and sincerely congratulated Ilya, and Maxim gritted his teeth and nervously collected his things in the office. He became even more angry with Ilya, not realizing that by doing this he was only ruining his own life, poisoning himself with hatred and envy. Grisha's fate was also unhappy. After carrying out his dirty business, giving his stepdaughter to an orphanage, and enriching himself at the expense of his sick wife, he immediately squandered the money abroad. At first I celebrated as much as possible and didn't deny myself anything. The alcohol flows, the beach, and beautiful tan girls. Grisha felt like the king of life, and his conscience did not torment him at all. After all, he never loved Vika and married only out of self-interest. After all, he himself has nothing to his name, so he decided to live at the expense of his wife. And little Sonia completely irritated him. In front of his wife, he had to pretend to be a kind father. But the girl quickly realized that he was fake and stayed away from him. The man didn't know how to get rid of the annoying and talkative girl, and thought that she would quickly grow up and go somewhere. And when Vika suddenly became seriously ill, he realized that this was his chance. Get rid of them all at once and take everything for yourself. Of course he had to spend money. He couldn't do everything alone, but it was worth it. Now the nasty girl is in the shelter, and the wife is probably in the grave. And he is rich and free. Live and be happy. But his joy was short-lived. One day Grisha drank too much and decided to learn to surf. He always watched with envy the ease and naturalness with which the artisans flew through the waves on the board. I could imagine what a pleasure it would be. But the instructor, hearing the smell of alcohol from him, hesitated and refused to go to sea with him. According to the rules, this is strictly prohibited. But, as a drunk knows, the sea is knee-deep, and Grisha, seizing the moment, simply grabbed the board without asking and ran forward. He wanted to show off in front of a beautiful girl in a bikini, show that he could do anything, and there was nothing to learn. And it had to happen. He couldn't keep his balance and was covered by a wave. It was not possible to save him. Such an absurd and stupid death. The instructor called the rescue team and the police, and, a few minutes later, they found the body. In Grisha's rented bungalow, in addition to documents and bundles of money, they found a telephone. Vicky received a call from the embassy asking if she could take her late husband's body and bury it. The woman responded sharply, "This man completely destroyed my entire life. I hate him, and I don't care who buries him and where." Apparently, fate itself punished him for all his sins. Don't bother me anymore. I don't want to know anything about Gregory. Vika didn't feel sorry for the scoundrel. This was revenge for everything he did. The woman with Ilya was truly happy, and only now did she understand what it means to love and be loved. There is no need to shout about it to the whole world. After all, love is in the little things, in every "I love you," in not waking her up, but in preparing a simple breakfast yourself, in hugging and supporting when things are bad and being sincerely happy when everything works out. And the most important thing is to love and raise your daughter together, worry about her, rejoice in her successes, and spend time with her. 6 months later, the couple decided to officially legitimize their relationship. It was Ilya who insisted on a luxurious celebration. Vika was against it at first. "Honey, why all this pomp? Everyone has a marriage. We don't have 20 years. Let's sign and that's it." But Ilya convinced her. "Well, no, pipes. Once the late Galia and I also modestly signed our names, and that's it, you and Grisha too. And I want everything in your life to be as it should be. After all, every woman dreams of this. Don't lie. Wear a white dress and feel like a bride. And age has absolutely nothing to do with it. I want this day to be memorable. Then we will grow old, lie on the sofa and watch videos, photos. It's so touching." They decided to celebrate in a restaurant. There were few guests, only my husband's parents, friends. Ilya invited his colleagues, with whom he has been saving people's lives shoulder to shoulder for many years. The nurses gasped, congratulated their beloved doctor, and everyone was surprised by Vika's change. They did not recognize her as the same beggar who had once been treated by them. Now they saw a chic, well-groomed woman in a snow-white, elegant dress. And next to her is a little princess, Svetochka. They also bought her a beautiful white dress. The girl looked like a doll. And most importantly, Vika's eyes shone with happiness and Ilya was filled with pride for his wife. Ilya's parents were happy for their son, saw that he had found a strong family again, and loved Svetochka as if she were their own family. Ilya laughed, threw Sonia up and said, "Here it is, my lucky ticket, my favorite button. Thanks for being with us, Mom. It was with your appearance that happiness returned to my home.